Hey guys, welcome back to the Ice Project Soundboard. 3 weeks in a row. Welcome back, Jade Spooner.
Thank you for having me. I'm so proud of us.
Finally,
3 in a row.
Finally got a producer behind here and going to turn this into some video format. So
beauty.
Pumped to get rolling. So hey, Bean, what's been happening in the past 2 weeks?
Yeah,
Mental health
good.
check-in.
Good. Everything's really good. Busy is good. Got some exciting stuff happening with potentially offloading Equolution, which is exciting. Hopefully I'll have some news next fortnight. But yeah, everything's happy days.
And caught up with, had some weddings over the past
I did. So my old assistant, Bree, got married on Friday. So that was good. Amal and I attended. And yeah, it was just a fun night. It was good. It was like, old time sort of thing. So yeah, it was a good night. But other than that, been pretty low key lately, which is nice.
We're talking about assistants before and I've got one and you've had one. How good are they?
Yeah, really good. Actually, we were saying this before because after I left Equolution and I didn't have an assistant anymore, I've had to be all over my life admin, like a wet rag. And I was hopeless before and now I'm so much better. And I was saying, I think it's because I'm like got my hands dirty with all my life admin now. So I feel like ignorance is bliss when you've got an assistant. They kind of keep a lot of things from you and kind of do it behind the scenes and just fix shit.
Yeah.
I.e. fines, things like that, registrations.
Do you reckon it's a common thing among entrepreneurs that we're kind of useless at a lot of things?
Total scatterbrains, I reckon, when it comes to that sort of stuff. And recently, I found out I actually have ADHD.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do, which explains 101 things. Life admin clutters my brain. Like, I find it really difficult. I think with work, to-do lists, it's why that sort of system works really well with me, just like writing down, ticking off sort of thing. But with life admin, anything that like you have to go through leaps and bounds to get the job done, like sitting in like a waiting room or something on the phone or going to Service New South Wales and standing in some queue to bloody do something with your license, all that shit, if you've got, I feel ADHD, so it ticks you in the wrong way.
What made you go get that checked?
I knew because I've seen so many bits and pieces on TikTok and I feel like there's so much content out there now that educates around this sort of stuff. It's like how, like you look back a decade ago, no one spoke about depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. And now there is so much out there where you've got access to other human experiences and people's, like with their professional opinions that they relay to other people.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing so many trends in what others were saying to what I experienced. And it wasn't like I needed an answer, but I just sort of wanted to, I think understanding you and your behaviors and stuff makes you a better operator. I just wanted to know my brain.
And I'm like that. I reckon I'd have it for sure. Like I
think a lot of people do, And
is it one of those things? It's like there's like a spectrum of it of how far along you are on it.
Well, I'm so sure my youngest brother, the brother below me, I'm so sure he's got it, and I think he's just like off the charts with it.
Yeah.
But I've always felt kind of a bit mild with it. Like attention span. It's really hard for me to concentrate, but then I can also focus beyond normal capacity.
Yeah.
So just those like the waves. It was a lot of waves.
It was funny when we were talking about assistants. Like one thing I do is I sort of put a dollar value on my time. So like say if it's like $1,000, if it doesn't equate to that $1,000, I won't do it.
Yep.
So like I don't do my washing. I clean my house, but I don't do like the big cleans. I get
either,
those. Yeah, I don't do
like
that
spend
stuff.
my one day off or something or half a day just cleaning the house.
Yeah. I got my house clean yesterday. Walked through and I was like, this feels so much better.
It's a bit of a blessing,
it's like
isn't
$60.
Yeah.
So all the washing gets all done, and in my mind, the way I sort of calculate is I can get that time back.
Yeah.
And I do that with cooking too. I'm like, I actually enjoy cooking, but it's just easier for me to eat out. I'm single. I just eat out every night.
Yeah. It's cheap. Like a lot of people think eating out is a luxury, but when you're single, it's pretty stock standard, same price.
Yeah, for sure. You don't have to think.
I paid like $6 for a capsicum the other day. So I'm like, eating out isn't looking like too bad of an option these days.
That's what a capsicum's going for right now.
Oh, it's outrageous. Everything, to be honest.
All right, we're going to dive into some Q&A, just jump straight into it. I think this is where we can provide the most value for you guys and girls and anyone else. We're not labeling anyone these days. All right, question number 1. If you were to start a business, what's one of the first steps you would take?
I think product market fit. So, what are you going to offer and putting that in the hands of your potential customers and seeing if you've got a fit or you've got something that tickles their fancy. I think that's always the first place to start. A lot of people will sit down and they'll register an ABN or come up with a business name. But if you've not got anything to sell, you're in a bit of a pickle. So I feel like the first place to start would be, you know, what are you trying to bring to the market, and does it actually work? In that, does it satisfy people? Does it solve a problem?
And is there sort of that painkiller vitamin analogy? Do you know that one where painkiller actually solves a problem? Vitamins just like if someone starts a clothing brand right now, you're a vitamin. You're just doing what everyone else is doing. Where a painkiller actually solves a problem. One thing I've started to look at now is a little bit more at data. So I'll look at and do market research. So me and you always trying to start new business ideas, or we go through the process of that mentally. One thing I do look at is actual data. Actually data. So I see if there's actually a market there, and then who's solving this problem right now. And
popular.
And is there anyone doing what I want to do in that sort of space? And if they are, how can I do it like a little bit differently?
Definitely.
Is it through pricing point? Is it through marketing? Is there a point of difference that I can clearly differentiate before I go into the market?
I totally agree with that. The unique selling proposition is a big one. So, you know, I don't get scared off by competitors. Like, I don't think it's a scary thing if there's other people operating the space. I think your job and obligation then as a founder is to innovate and do it better. You know, I don't think that just because it exists and it's not a, you know, very unique idea or whatnot, or a you know, innovation or something, I don't think that it's a big deal. Like, I think competitors are healthy.
And just like clothes is always easy because people can relate to it, but there's different ways you can do it. Like obviously marketing's one, and how you make people feel when they're wearing those clothes. Another one is price point. Like most people, like Gucci doesn't make a shirt anymore. They probably make a shirt cheaper than ours, but they price it at $500, $600, $700 because it's a sign of status signaling. It's a sign of like wealth or perceived wealth. And there's another way you can do it is like through selling out. So never been available. So guys like Jade, their stock seems to sell out very quickly, and it creates a hype and a demand around it. So there's different ways you can do it, but it's just really understanding what you want to do before you go into it. Agree.
Who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. 4 key questions to ask.
Love that. What's something startups should know but don't? It's hard.
It's not easy. There is a lot of support out there if you look for it. One thing that I think a lot of startups don't know about is government grants that exist for startups. There's female founder grants. There's an MVP grant if you're moving into the tech space. There's a lot of opportunities to get a little bit of a head start. So, a lot of people think that they need money to start a business, in which case, 9 times out of 10 you actually do. But there's a lot of support within, the mentor space, and also even just like financially through government grants and stuff that I think aren't really sort of known about.
Yeah. So with grants, do you have to give up anything, or do you have to pay it back?
No equity or anything like that. There's some terms and conditions in, like, for example, the MVP grant, where you have to co-match the amount that you get from the government. So say, for example, you get 200 grand, you need to show that you're going to co-match that to make the investment into the business 400,000. You don't give away any sort of equity or anything like that. There is sort of like criteria. So, for example, like female founders grants, obviously the founder would be female and all that kind of stuff.
Can you identify as female?
There is like particular criteria that you need to sort of satisfy. The MVP grant, for example, the process is kind of long-winded, but once you get through the hurdle, like it's well worth it. But there's heaps of things like that in a lot of different, I'm sure even thinking about like, the agricultural space or something like that. I'm sure there's something, that the government does to support that sort of space too. So there's heaps of options.
I think it's good diving into those sort of spaces too, because one thing I used to do, and I used to take pride in it, that my parents told me never ask for money or anything like that.
Agreed.
So when I went into business and we were going well and COVID was happening, we were growing, but we could still apply for grants, but I'd never do it just because I'm like, oh, we're going okay. Like I don't need anything. Yeah. In my mind, I thought, that
looking back now though, you're like, I wish I,
and like if those positions or those opportunities come up and the government's offering them, take them as much as you can.
I totally agree.
Because when it comes to tax time, they're not going the other way. You know what I mean?
There's no shame in that. Yeah. When you're in a high income earning tax bracket, like you'll fall off your seat with how much you need to pay. So if you can get a really good head start at the beginning, take it while you can. There's not many handouts that come along the way.
I love that. How do you find extra time in business?
One way that I've found it is through automation. So I think you'll find, there's a lot of, especially in services, I've been involved in service-based businesses. There's a lot of things that you do on repeat repetitively, and just automating those processes. More recently I've learned about, creating client portals, putting education on there, drip feeding it, sequencing emails, things like that to create like sort of a customer journey. So then you can use your one-on-one time for that personalized and customized element of the service.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can do with like tools and even just creating customer journeys where you can do automation. You can do it in e-com as well with, sales funnels and stuff like that too.
And email marketing.
Yeah, but back in the day, that was all manual.
Yeah.
Like going back like sort of 10 years ago, not many people automated anything. Everything was like, manual follow-ups and stuff like that.
Do you know what's weird? And it's probably a bad habit I have. I hate being too planned ahead. Does that sound weird to you?
I feel like it's fair. Like, I get that.
Yeah, because ideally, like, I could literally map out my next 4 or 5 collections in a row, bundle it all up in 2 weeks, shoot them all, automate everything out, and just sort of sit back and relax. But I don't know why.
I think maybe for you, it might be like the thrill of, like, keeping it in the times and, quite present. And also as well, I think commitment, you might be a little,
I think I got some commitment issues, eh?
There might be that sort of side of things, like locking in for too long, like I don't know, like it could be something and then even from a creative flair perspective, the ability to be able to be agile and like chop and change as thoughts come up and whatnot, maybe there's a bit of fun in that as well. But I could see how I could
like
see
if someone goes, let's go dinner next week, I'm like, it's a little bit too far
I know.
away.
We're classic for that, hey. Like most of our catch-ups were like 24, 48 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
I'd rather move that way. Find time in business. I think sometimes, like I used to fall under the illusion that the more time I spent in the business, the more I'd get done. And we live in a hustle culture now where like, you need to be grinding. But it wasn't until someone said to me that a smart business can figure out how to make twice as much revenue in half the time. Like that's what smart people do.
True.
So you don't want to be fighting and clawing for success because you start to, and we've both been through this phase where you start to lose friends and sometimes I've become like a dick and egotistical because in my mind I thought I had to be grinding and hustling and I had a lot of people looking at me from the outside in and say, I see you work hard. But I think if you want to be successful, not only in business but in life, happiness and balance comes with that. And it's something I'm still learning now, but something I'm sort of fighting for. I
agree. And I think your version of balance will look different to someone else's as well.
We can't judge anyone else's balance.
I think like you being able to get up in the morning, train, go for a swim, get a coffee, get brekkie, and then come into work at like 8 o'clock, that might be your version of balance. But to some people theirs is like starting work at 10 and finishing at 4 or something like that. You know what I mean? So I feel like everyone has different versions of what that looks like for them, but prioritizing it, I think if you don't have it, working in your business to find it, naturally you get better at what you do because you're trying to work towards creating more time. So that is the goal. I found that recently in Big Appetite as well. Like it's far from sustainable at this point in time. Like it's so heavily reliant on me. But I just know with every week that passes and with every step forward, it moves towards that more scalable, sustainable model where I could disappear and the thing would still go. You know what I mean? And I just think you have to look at it from a process perspective as well. I've sucked up and, grin and bear the fact that the balance doesn't exist right now. But I know it will come and I've got an idea of what that looks like when it does come. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. And there's a difference between a business owner and a business owner. Where like a business owner, like say someone who's like a barber, but they don't have any staff, for their business to make money, they have to be within there from like sort of that 9 to 5, where an actual business owner is someone who can sit on top of his business, create really cool systems, hire A class people, step back and it still makes money. That's the difference.
It's so true. It's like my partner Matt has got a signage company, right? And he's obviously in trades and he does exceptionally well. Like the business does fantastic. But trades is so hard because like he's got a twin brother, like literally identical twin. So they're basically duplicated and they've got the same sort of like attention to detail. They're both really, really good at their job. But they can't find anyone else that's like them. Like they genuinely can't. So it's just kind of like put a ceiling on the business because whilst it goes really well, it's like, it's great while the twins are in it. You know what I mean? And then after that, you build relationships over time as well with a lot of service-based businesses where they want you. And, I even wonder what that looks like in the future for, my agency. Like, they probably come to us as like the startup girls because, you know, you've got a bit of history and you've done it, runs on the board, they'll be a good fit for the job. And then it's like, well, what does the future look like if you take the sort of main characters out of it?
I think about that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, actually. Because I looking at a lot of the YouTube brands, and they're building brands, but they're not built around their like own name. It's cool at the start when your brand's sort of built around you because you sort of get all the credit from it. But I think it's really important to build a brand that can outlive you, or you could sell when it's not too much attached to you.
Well, I agree. I think keyword sell, like going through that process with Equolution, if that was at all tied to, like I, for example, look at the Kayla Itsini's sweat exit sort of thing. And, you know, from what I know from like the outside is just sort of, I think Toby's just, you know, been able to exit. Kayla's still got like ties to the business, does content, etc. Whether that was a choice or not, I don't know. But I think there was a personal attachment to that brand, and like the people love her. And, you know, I think when you create a business that you can sell and completely move away from, I think you have to strategically do things along the way to make that sort of possible. Otherwise, there's that branding tie that is to you for as long as the people want it. And without people, maybe the brand doesn't have the value that an investor buys into.
Interesting. And a lot of time when you see people sort of exit, they'll have to sort of remain in the business for like a year or two.
Yeah. There's usually terms and things like that. But I feel like some more than others. Like there are some businesses that have been really built around a personal profile. They are a brand in that like they're an alias that doesn't have an attachment to their personal name, but still I think from a consumer perspective, like 50% of the reason why they've made that purchase or they're in that brand is because of that person. So it's always a consideration. Yeah,
because there's always like I hear people talk about like we talked about product to market fit before, but like a lot of investors when they're looking into a place, they'll go product to market to founder fit. So there's like this sort of golden triangle. And if you think of an analogy of like in race and sort of horse racing where some people back the horse, some people back the jockey.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, a lot of people will look at the jockeys within businesses and see if they're actually good enough for them to build towards this next phase, or are you in a shaky ship?
Yeah, so. I know that from my stepdad's TAB Saturdays. The research.
There's a jockey list going on. Would you work with friends or family?
Yeah, I would. Just because I think in my experience, they're always last man standing. And I think that sort of loyalty and allegiance, and like, as you know, it's such an important thing because you can invest so much time into your business, its growth, its people. And at the end of the day, you've always got this sense of it's just me at the end. Yeah. But it's a different kettle of fish when you work specifically with family. Yeah. I think there is, you know, there's that loyalty that you just, you can't find it anywhere else.
Yeah, that's true. You can't manufacture that.
No, you can't.
I've never worked with family, and I've done 3 elements of friends. 50% of it's been good, 50% of it's bad. Yep. So I think the hard thing is when a lot of people go into business with their friends, they're not business people to start off with. So they're like, oh, this person's going to back me, or we're going to do this together. Yeah. And if you look at our journey, for example, like I've gone all in on business, and Chico and Normie have kind of just always been in that sort of footy scene. So I've sort of grown in this sort of business route, and they've sort of stayed the same. But like I'm happy to take those guys along with me because loyalty is important to me. So I've signed a contract. I'll honor that contract for as long as I live. Now I'm in a space now, and I want to go into business with a friend. So me and Jade go into business. I'd understand what I like and what I don't like, and we could almost call it like business boundaries. I know people have relationship boundaries, but I know what I can do and I know what you can bring. So I think our one would be fine, but it'll be a business first relationship.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is also a consideration too, is whether you've got the ability to be able to split business and friendship, relationship and business, etc. Like I think some people have that ability to be able to make the split. I think other people just, it's just too muddy and they just can't emotionally do it. First time round for me, for example, I went into business with my best friend, and it was a partnership that like, it was 8 years old. Like, so it went really, really well, and we did fantastic things together. And I think, the friendship didn't, for 90% of the partnership, the friendship didn't suffer. It was when, the business gets bigger, pressures get heightened, stress gets higher and whatnot, and your problems just, they get huger, and it puts stresses on. You have to be willing to understand that when you go into business, and there's a relationship there, that it can take a toll if, you know, things, you know, grow and they get trickier.
And the hard thing is a lot of it's in business is money stress, or like cash flow stress, and it's the same reason most marriages break up. It's because of money. So I don't know. I think if you're a business person, you understand business, it's okay to go in with friends because you understand what's going to go on. And I think I'm at a point now when if I went into a business with a friend and it didn't end up, like, we built a great relationship, business, but our friendship suffered, I could live with that.
Yep.
But right now for me, I'd rather just build businesses in my little area and just have my friends on the side.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. And I feel like each their own as well. And a big part of decision making when you're a business owner is listening to your gut, and I think you always have like a bit of a gut instinct about these types of things as well. One thing that I've learnt through my experience of, you know, leaving a company is that things do come in waves, and they are for periods of time. I used to think that you had to have back one horse for forever, but now really kind of becoming more of like an entrepreneur rather than a business owner now, in having, you know, my hands in a few different pies sort of thing. I understand that things are for moments, you know, and to appreciate the moment and the productivity and the result and everything like that while it's there. And if that means that two friends create something fantastic together and reap the benefits until it doesn't work anymore, like, so be it, you know?
Yeah. We're friends that made a couple million and we're going to be all right. Most valuable hire in a business? Very broad question. Depends what sort of phase you're in, but what do you reckon?
I think it always depends on what you don't inherently have from a skill set perspective. I think for me personally, like, graphic design has always been, you know, the head of what I do in creating brands that, you know, have a presence on social media. I could never do that myself. Even the old Canva skills are pretty shonky. So I feel like that's always something that I go to first. And then in my co-founder relationships, I've always had someone that, like, Amal was exceptional with finances and money and stuff like that. I am not great. So to have someone that's more of like an operational sort of on that front foot, that's my first go-tos, but it's because it complements my skill set. It's not something that I have.
Yeah, I agree with Jade. Someone who's sort of completely opposite to you, but then can sort of understand you at the same time. Because we've talked about this before. Like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are weird. You kind of have to be to go against like the norm. So for me, I'm similar to you. Like, I struggle in sort of operation roles, or what I've sort of really figured out, I struggle in management roles and dealing with people day to day. So if we do scale out or I build bigger teams, those are the first people I'll be hiring.
100%. I totally agree.
I need a wall between me and everyone else.
I agree. And I don't think that is such a bad thing. You know, like, I don't want to,
because we're coming up with the ideas.
Yeah,
like, you know
it's just like, I think your connection to the team should be things like creating a really good company culture. And I feel like when you're away from the shit, you've got a really positive energy that you can inject into the business, where you look at things from a more outsider looking in perspective, and you can say, we need a team day of some sort, or, you know, how can I make you thrive, or are you, you know, in the right position that complements your skill set? That can only happen if you're not pissed off with everyone. You know, and if you're in amongst the day to day, the conversations even sometimes will piss you off. It's like, come on guys, this is small, let's fix it, get over it. Or less problems, more solutions, you know. And that's for you, like, you leave that to be navigated through, but I think it shouldn't affect your attitude. And the best way for that to happen is if you kind of remove from the situation and not micromanaging as such.
Agree. And if you're in entrepreneurship, you're actually good at something. So it's like sort of doubling down on that skill that you're actually good at, and creating more time for you to create the ideas. Because I feel like I'm an ideas person, you're an ideas person. The less time we have to do to figure out ideas, the less like our company's going to grow.
So
I've got a question for a couple ones from the inner circle.
Oh, beautiful.
Advice for a young entrepreneur: option to buy his first property at 25, or to quit your job, travel, and become a digital nomad. And I hope this make it, but that's the two questions. So buy a home at 25, or quit his job and travel, become a digital nomad. Obviously, don't take this word by word.
Yeah, I don't want that pressure. Look, I am very business first. I have definitely over the years put my investment of myself and any capital that I've had into my businesses before setting up personal wealth, which would mean the security of like property and stuff like that. I'm a late bloomer in that regard. So I'm a bit YOLO. So I hear the opportunity to have an experience, maybe learn, maybe it starts the career, and I'm like, that's where I'd go. But in the same breath, you know, to get to like, you know, 30 or something like that and be like, oh shit, I'd like a little bit more security. Building it from that point in time is a little bit trickier. You know, you don't have as many years behind you to just kind of learn. You've got to really make action at that point. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think at 25, it's that weird age where you feel like you start to have your life together and you're like 5 years, I'm going to be 30 and I need to be married and have kids. And it's changing. It's changing so much. So if you're going to buy a house, buy it for the right reasons. But if you're going to, like, I've never regretted traveling. I've never traveled somewhere and go, do you know what? I fucking hate that.
So true.
But
and you can do it in different ways too. You don't have to go and be bougie and blow all your cash. You can go and experience and, you know, do it on a budget and whatnot. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're wasting time and money. It's always a good experience, right?
Yeah. Because, and like the thing is 25, like your friends start getting like houses and stuff.
It's an awkward age.
It's a weird age. Yeah. And then just think about it, like actually calculate the numbers, like hang around an accountant. Like if I'm going to get a mortgage, this is my down payment. So basically all my money's gone. Therefore I have to create this. Now interest rates are really high. So most people have to pay double their mortgages. So there's going to be a lot of houses coming off the market soon or a lot of houses selling and there's going to be all this sort of stuff. So really like don't just buy it because everyone else is buying a house.
You've got to be ready for the commitment.
Yeah. You got to be ready for that.
So true.
If you've got a family, might be a little bit different and you want to set a nest for your family to grow. I understand all that. But just don't buy a house because everyone else who's 25 is buying a house.
I think Gary Vee says it really well when he talks about the decades and, you know, learnings and things like that. He's like, in your 20s, he's like, just make as many mistakes, but lessons, learnings, etc. as possible. Really refine in your 30s and in your 40s, you'll be cracker. And he even talks about 50s and 60s. And he's like, I don't even want to think about what I'll be like, you know, in those decades because of everything that I've, you know, learned and accumulated over time. I just look at the 20s now is such a different attitude. When you're in
it's
your
like the new teenager, eh?
Yeah, when you're in your 20s, you think that the clock is ticking. I think the tricky thing for females is like
biological clock.
Yeah, there's that. I was at 29 and I didn't have a partner and stuff, and I was like, oh God, should I freeze my eggs? Like, you know. But in saying that as well, I still think that experience and learning over safety and security is maybe my nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like, we're both business people. Like, if I had a 50K something in there, I'd be like, how can I turn this into
100%? I totally
how can I turn this into $1 million?
Whereas, like, I'm sure there's some people that'd be like stock market or property down payment, you know, little townhouse in Queensland or something.
All right, Connor, I hope that helps. Advice on starting over for you. This is for you.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think at the end of the day, like, attitude is everything. Like, it is a choice. And, you know, I was sort of excited for the challenge personally, but I could have been down in the dumps and been like, my life is going to change, you know, or whatever, because it does incrementally, like it does change for a little moment in time. And you've got to relearn a lot of things that at one point you were, you know, either way above or didn't think that you'd ever have to, you know, touch on that again or something like that. But I just think that I'm a little bit woo-woo and spiritual in that, like, I think that everyone's path is laid out, and I think that we're just kind of walking a map. Like, I think it's already there, and I have this huge trust for that same reason. Like, you know, I think that, I just trust that everything will work out. That's my attitude with everything.
Well, there's the other option is just give up, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Well, what are your choices at that point in time?
Yeah, start over, give up. And
I think starting over too, like,
you're start
obviously doing it
quicker.
Yeah, I think you're doing it for a reason. So if you're ever in a moment in time where you're like, fuck, this is hard, well, what's harder, that or where you were before that you needed to leave so badly that you chose to start over again? You know what I mean? I've often thought of that as well, you know, like with this whole exiting Equolution thing, like, yeah, going into a startup after having 30 staff and, you know, a company that basically works with its eyes shut, it was really freaking difficult. Yeah. But I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Do you want to go back there? No. Well, this is the option. So, yeah. And
I think you learn a lot of lessons. Like, I think about it sometimes where you see mums and they have their first baby and that first year and a half and 2 years is really, really hard and sort of get to 2.5, 3 years and they're kind of keen to go back into it and have another one. So
true, right?
Yeah. Yep. So sometimes it feels like that. But if you go back and have your second baby, you're a little bit smarter. You're a little bit wiser. You're a little bit more comfortable in the situation where you're at. And like if someone gave me a baby now and I had to look after it for a while, for an hour, I'd fucking panic.
You'd just give it over to someone.
Yeah, Tasha would be sweet. But if I had to look after that baby, I'd shit myself because I don't know what to do.
It's true.
But for us in business, because we've been through situations and experiences before, for us starting again, it's like, oh, this is kind of nice.
I'm not a mum, and this might be an ignorant thing to say, but I sort of do compare having a business like raising a child. Like the start is chaotic and you don't know what you're doing and a lot of things are guessing, but eventually after putting in the time, the work and really finding your feet in it, it goes off to college or, it becomes a little bit more self-sufficient.
He can go play with his friends for a couple of hours.
Yeah. I mean, like I do kind of compare the two because it's my version of having kids right now, but I think that things do get easier along the way. The start is always quite tricky.
And you never stop thinking about it, do you?
No.
Especially in those early days.
Never.
3 o'clock.
Yeah, I know, literally.
Last question. How do you set up a solid foundation for your business when starting out? What are the important things you need in place?
I think very broadly systems and processes are like a blanket statement. But
can we look internally on this one? Because we could now, what do you think you need individually before? So
I think you need to really understand the ins and outs of the finances. I think you need to know what it costs you to run your business. I think you need to understand what is a necessity versus what's would be nice to have, i.e. a marketing budget versus like paying staff that are integral for the delivery of whatever it is. And then understanding from a revenue perspective what comes in, what goes out, profit margins, etc. I think that really basic financial understanding is absolutely necessary. So then along the way you can have a grip of if things are looking a bit shaky or, you have to pay bills. So it's like, everything needs to go accordingly so that you've got money to pay bills. And if you don't, you dip into your own back pocket. Like that's sort of the nature. I've personally been really fortunate. I've not had to do those sorts of things, but I can only imagine like cash flow is not something that's in abundance for especially startups. Yeah. So I think having a grip on those financial structures is hugely important.
Yeah, I agree. And like you hear UFC fighters talk about like they say like jiu-jitsu is a really good foundation to grow up on because if the fight ever goes to the ground, they're going to be in a safe sort of spot. For me, and it's fucking dumb, like sounds boring to say, but finances is a thing that actually helps businesses grow. So someone could come to me, someone could come to Jade and go, like, here's my business idea, blah, blah, blah. Roughly, we're not that great at math or anything, but we'll quickly calculate in our head if we think it's going to succeed or not. Because the more margin you got within your product or service, the more room you've got to grow.
Yep.
So if you're running on super low margins, there's not much room for there to grow because you can't spend any money on marketing or influencer marketing or anything along those lines. And then the next thing we look at is, especially in product, is sort of payment terms. Like how long do you have to pay that back? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? What's the life cycle of a dollar? So just through experiences and failures, we know how hard it can be with cash flow, and we can quickly look at a business. And then we've got accountants. We could give them the P&L sheet and they'll go, yes,
and they'll
no.
go, you're right or you're not right. Another thing that I think is hugely important is branding and positioning. Like, who are you? How is that then communicated in your marketing messaging? And how do you keep consistent with that throughout every piece of content that you put out there, every email marketing strategy, every campaign? Like, how does it represent you and what you're putting out there to the market? I think there needs to be this like establishment of, I always say it, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. I think that needs to be almost like a solid foundation that it can be seen in everything you do. Like that consistent messaging should be through every single channel that people can, have a touch point with you. And if it's not there consistently, you get lost a bit in the messaging. Because
it's saturated.
The
market is saturated. Yep. No matter what most industries you're going to go into, especially for a startup, there's really anyone that's starting anything super new or anything along those lines. All right, my friend, thanks for jumping on. 30 minutes on the dot.
Having me.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.